Georg Fischer's containment piping system provides the necessary environmental protection and includes many features which yield benefits to the owner, engineer, and installer. The retrofit capabilities and chemical resistance of containment make it the ideal choice for containment piping of chemical process lines. Georg Fischer offers two types of adhesive injection guns. The most common adhesive injection gun is a manual plunger-style gun. A pneumatic gun is also available. The pneumatic gun utilizes a quick disconnect fitting for connection of a pressurized line of not more than 73 psi. A regulator is used to provide a consistent pressure of 30 psi or less, providing consistent flow of adhesive. The adhesive cartridge is loaded by first unscrewing the retaining nut and removing the adhesive plug. The plug is set aside for later use to store the remaining adhesive. Because the ratio of the two parts of the adhesive is already set by the cartridge, the selector on the side of the gun is set to 1:1. The lever at the rear of the gun is fully retracted. The adhesive cartridge is now inserted in the gun and pressed firmly in place. The adhesive has two parts, and enough adhesive is ejected to verify that both parts flow from the cartridge. The appropriate mixing tip is installed and secured with the retaining nut. The trigger is pulled and pressure applied to the cartridge to begin the flow of adhesive through the mixing tip. Enough adhesive, approximately a teaspoon, is ejected and verified that it is a consistent white color and flows evenly from the mixing tip. During shipping, the end of the split pipe may become misaligned, possibly causing the pre-drilled crossover hole to become misaligned as well. The installer corrects this misalignment by using a rubber mallet and tapping into the pipe until the misalignment is corrected. Finally, the alignment of the crossover hole is verified. When a pre-drilled crossover hole is not available, a new crossover hole must be drilled. A mark is placed 1 inch in from the end of the pipe. To drill the crossover hole, and depending on the size of the split pipe, one of two appropriate containment drill bits is used. Using firm pressure, a crossover hole is drilled into the seam of the split pipe adhesive track. Crossover holes must be drilled on both sides of the split pipe and burrs removed. To install a flexible termination fitting on a split pipe, a square cut stub of solid pipe must be added. The lower half of the coupling is installed and verified that both split and solid pipe are seated properly against the fitting stops. Next, the upper half of the coupling is installed and also verified that both split and solid pipes are seated properly against the fitting stops. The metal clips supplied with the fittings are installed by hand in an alternating pattern. After all the clips have been hand fit into place, a metal hammer is used to tap the metal clips into the final position. The flexible termination fitting is installed by sliding the rubber boot over the end of the primary pipe and onto the containment solid pipe. The band clamps are moved into their proper location on the termination fitting, and a driver nut is used to tighten the band clamps onto the pipe. Now the split pipe can be sealed. To do this, adhesive is injected into the second port from the fitting. The adhesive tip is firmly pressed into the port, and adhesive is injected until the adhesive fills the track, approximately halfway between the ports, creating a back pressure plug of adhesive. Tape is used to keep the adhesive from coming out of the injection port. Continuing to the exposed port closest to the fitting, adhesive is ejected until the pipe track is filled and adhesive begins to come out of the crossover hole. This is repeated on the opposite side. Again, tape is used to keep adhesive from coming out of the injection port. The fitting can now be injected with adhesive. The adhesive tip is firmly pressed into the fitting injection port and the fitting track is filled halfway. This process is repeated on the opposite side until the track is completely filled and the tab area on either side of the fitting is halfway filled. The process is completed on the opposite side of the fitting and the tab area is completely filled. The process of fitting injection and sealing of the fitting has now been completed. The pipe is sealed by injecting adhesive down the track, moving from port to port. Enough adhesive is injected so that it travels down the pipe track halfway to the next port. After injecting adhesive, tape is used to cover the injection hole to minimize the amount of adhesive that escapes from the injection port. This process is repeated until the tracks on both sides of the pipe are completely filled. For installation of a rigid termination fitting, one half of a fitting is put into place so that the installer can mark the location of the bushing. A black Sharpie is used to mark the pipe. Adhesive is added to both halves of the bushing, with adhesive being added to the edges of one half. The bushing and lower termination half are installed on the pipe, followed by the upper half of the bushing. The top half of the termination fitting is quickly installed with extra pressure being applied to the bushing. The metal clips supplied with the fittings are installed by hand in an alternating pattern. After all clips have been hand fitted into place, a metal hammer is used to tap the metal clips into the final position. As we saw with the coupling, adhesive is injected into the second port from the fitting, and tape is used to keep the adhesive from coming out of the injection port. Adhesive is injected into the port closest to the fitting, and tape is applied. Like the coupling, the fitting ports are then injected on both sides of the fitting until the track and tab areas are completely filled with adhesive. Flexible termination fittings include a pressure test port. GF has a pressure test gauge for double containment fittings. By connecting the gauge to a test port via a Schrader valve, the system can be pressurized up to a max pressure of 5 psi. The test gauge includes a release valve to remove the pressure after testing. When transitioning from containment solid pipe and scheduled PVC and CPVC piping systems, the use of an adapter sleeve is required. A generous amount of IPS vinyl primer and solvent cement are applied per manufacturer standards. The adapter is pushed onto the pipe until the adapter stop butts up against the pipe end. Excess cement is then wiped away. This process is repeated for the scheduled PVC or CPVC fittings. Installation of a female adapter can only be done on solid pipe. To begin, adhesive is applied in a circular manner around the inside of the fitting. Once approximately 3 passes have been made around the inside of the fitting, the pipe is now coated with 3 additional passes. After adhesive has been applied to both the pipe and the female adapter, the pipe is inserted into the female adapter. The female adapter can now be used to install a drain fitting. The drain fitting is pre-wrapped with Teflon tape. The threads are tightened per normal piping procedures. The basic installation of a containment piping system has now been completed.